Hey, how you doing? Happy New Year! I hope this year is an absolutely awesome one for you in every way. Now, the start of the year is a really great time to have a think about your guitar journey, where you've been, where you're going, what you hope to achieve, and that kind of stuff. Now, it's something that I do for myself every year. It's like a little annual review. I write down my goals, and what I thought I'd do is share with you some of the things, some of the tips that I found most helpful for me when I'm planning my year ahead and what things I'd like to do, and try and help you out on trying to stay on track as well, because often that's the hardest part. Is all of us feel like the beginning of the year can be, you get a nice practice routine sorted out and it lasts about a week or 2 weeks and then you fall off. So what I thought I'd try and do is give you as many hints as I could that will help you not only start off the year really well, but manage to maintain it for as much of the year as you possibly can. There's a link in the description there that will take you through all of these points and links to various parts of the website that will go into most of these points in a little bit more detail as well. So you'll probably find that quite helpful. So let's get on to point number 1, which is spend equal time playing and practicing. Now, I really think it's a good idea to separate those two things out. So playing is enjoying yourself, playing songs that you want to do, just jamming around, mucking around with a looper. It really can be anything, just having the guitar in your hands and having some fun with it. And practice is stuff like running scales, practicing licks, practicing intervals, lick patterns, music theory. There's loads of different things that could be considered kind of practice. And it's true that you could just play a lot, and you will get a lot better if you just play a lot. That's a fact. But if you practice, it kind of accelerates how quickly you get to your destinations, depending on where it is that you want to go. We'll talk about that more in a second. So I really think it's a good idea to break it into those two chunks. Normally, I'd recommend doing the practice part first, so you get that out of the way because it's the least fun, and then doing the playing part afterwards, because you might find that the playing part kind of extends into the part that you should have been practicing, especially if your time is a little limited. I've got a series of lessons over on the website called Effective Practice, which if you haven't checked it out already might be worth digging into now. Covers a whole heap of different things, but one of the key elements is about regularity of practice. Now, it's a really, really good idea if you can try and find a little bit of time to practice every day. Okay, for some people, due to work or family commitments, that's not going to be possible, in which case you are just going to have to do it all on a Saturday afternoon or whatever. But if you can, try and do a little bit of practice every day. Half an hour, 15 minutes, whatever you can manage. The optimum amount, I think, for practice is an hour a day. That's what I aim for myself, and that's a really great amount to practice. You can get a lot of done in that time. You've got half an hour to just muck around and have some fun, and half an hour is plenty of time to really get stuck into some technical work as well. Another little hint that I'd like to share with you now is exploring the possibility of doing some practice at work. Now, this for certain isn't going to work for everyone. Totally depends on where you work. But a lot of big corporations are quite open to using a part of the building as a kind of a rec room, a recreation room, where you might find that you can practice at lunch. A couple of my students have even said their companies bought them stuff to put in the rooms. So you might find that you can have, if there's other people working at your company, you can get together and do some jamming or do some practice in your lunch break, that kind of thing. Or before work, if you get out of the house, drop the kids at school, you can find yourself a half an hour before work starts. That kind of thing can work. Of course, again, this isn't going to work for everyone, but if your company is that kind of place, it might be worth making some inquiries and finding out if it's possible to get yourself a rec room. Big hint number 2 is to set yourself some realistic goals. A key word there is realistic. Now, this is covered in a lot more detail in the Effective Practice series, so you might want to go and check that out. But generally speaking, you want to have 3 goals. You want to have a long-term goal. So what would you like to have achieved by Christmas next year? Did you want to play in a band? Did you want to do an open mic? Do you want to get a recording guitar? Think about exactly what it is that you think is a realistic and achievable goal for Christmas next year. You want to set a midterm goal, which should be where you think that you can probably get to if your end of year goal is going to come good. Okay, so that's like a testing ground to see if you need to adapt what you're practicing and that kind of thing. It's a fairly important thing, I think, especially if you've got really solid goals. So some people have kind of fluid goals of things that they'd like to achieve, and they're not really sure what they're capable of or what they want to do, especially beginners. They're like, well, I'm not really sure what's realistic. So in that case, you might just say, hey, I want to play some songs for my family and friends next Christmas. Okay, that's a fairly easy goal. You're not specifying how many or how hard, So by the middle of the year, you just want to make sure that maybe you've got a couple of songs on the burner that you'd be able to do. You don't want to make them real heavy. Guitar is fun. Okay, so having fun for guitar for the next year could be your goal, and that would be a great goal. In fact, that's kind of one of my goals this year, is just to really get back to enjoying playing guitar. So I have got a proper routine going on, but I'm also trying to make sure I spend at least the same amount of time as I'm doing practice as having fun this year. And I normally don't, I recommend for you having the fun and practice, but I haven't been practicing what I've been preaching. Oh my God, there's so many little cliches in this spiel today. Now, you should also set yourself some short-term goals as well. Now, I think the best one would be by the end of January to give yourself a kind of gauge of how much stuff you're doing. It could be by the end of January, you want to have stuck to your practice routine, and you want to have done, 5 days a week for the 4 weeks up to the end of January. It could be very specific. It could be, I want to be able to improvise over autumn leaves, or it could be, I want to learn the 7 patterns of the 3-note string major scale, or it could be, think of little tangible things that you want to be able to do. The more measurable that you make your goals, the easier they are to kind of use as a motivational tool. So if you say, hey, I want to play pattern 1 of my major scale at 120 BPM, that's very measurable. At the end of that month, you can play the scale up and down. And if you can do it at that speed, then you've achieved your goal. Now, if you're going to do those kind of measurable goals, it's a really good idea to really make sure they're achievable, if not make them slightly on the side of easy, because what you want to be doing is feeling like you're always achieving your goals, and that'll help you keep up the motivation. If you set goals that are far too hard for yourself and you never quite reach them, it can be a little disheartening. So if you're going to use measurable goals, which I think is a great idea, try and make them as realistic as possible. And then, or realistic, and then dumb them down just a little bit to give yourself a better chance of achieving them. Just, again, to help continue the motivation through the year and not just in that first little period. Okay, big hint number 3 is to make the most of your time. Now, time is finite. There's only so many hours that we're on this planet. You want to make the most of every single minute. And one thing that, for me personally, and perhaps it'll resonate with you as well, is I think if I spent as much time practicing guitar as I'd spent on social media last year, I'd be a lot better guitar player. And that doesn't seem like a good trade-off. Sure, I mean, there's some interesting stuff on social media, and maybe it adds some kind of value to my life, but not really. And I think for me personally, that's definitely one that I'm trying to nip in the bud now. I'm only going to be using social media as aside from work stuff and posting about new lessons and stuff, I don't think I want to just spend my time, on the endless scroll looking at pictures of stuff. I'd rather be playing music and furthering the thing that I love doing. And I think it would be a good idea for all of us to examine the value of that and how it affects our lives and what we could be doing with that time, because it does eat into a lot of time. Now, sure, probably some of you are saying, yeah, but I look at the social media when I couldn't be doing anything else. And that's, a fairly valid point. But particularly when it comes to guitar, there's lots of stuff that you can do in your mind that you don't even have to have a guitar in your hand for. And I've done a lesson on this. There'll be a link in the description you might want to check out. But things like visualizing scale patterns, thinking about music theory, running the notes and the chords and the keys, that kind of stuff can be done in your mind. Visualizing solos and songs that you're learning, chord progressions. There's so much stuff that you can do that's really valuable that you can practice in your mind. If you build a little mental fretboard, you can picture your hands moving, and you will learn that. It's always better if you've got the option of playing guitar. You're better off playing guitar, right? That's no question. But if you haven't got access to the guitar, it's definitely something to think about. When you've got those periods where there's just nothing going on, to go into have a little pool of ideas of things that you can think about on the guitar. As you get better and understanding the fretboard more, you can think about chords and chord grips and even hearing the sounds of what it's going to sound like where you place your fingers. So don't give up on that as an idea and think that, just because I'm standing at the bus stop for 10 minutes or stuck in a traffic jam or whatever, doesn't mean that you have to be, well, actually you shouldn't be using Instagram in the car anyway, but you know what I mean. Just really think about how you're using your time and really max out on it. Don't spend time on things that don't give you value in your life. That's kind of like a life hint, if you don't mind me being a bit philosophical there. I think that's the older I get, that stuff becomes more and more important. When you're 18, it feels like, you've got forever. But as you get older, you start going, well, hey, that's there's an end point over there, Now I've finished my little rant about social media, let me give you a couple of other hints that you might find valuable. And the first one is to use a timer when you practice. So write down the things, get a routine going of the stuff that you actually want to work on this year. And then if you've got 5 minutes of practicing the major scale in thirds or whatever, then you set your timer, you hit start, and you focus on doing that thing until the timer tells you to stop. Now, if you get into the habit of doing that, you'll find that you can really zone in, and you'll find that you get a lot more benefit from that 5 minutes than you might have 10 minutes when you're kind of playing it a little bit, thinking about something else or getting distracted or letting other thoughts enter your mind. You really want to train your mind to go like totally ninja on that one idea for that 5 minute period. And that's how I structure my routine. So, I have a list of the different things that I'm doing for 5 minutes, and I start the first one, I hit start, and I don't do anything on that. I don't answer the phone, I don't check anything, it's my life, there's nothing that urgent. It's not like I'm a heart surgeon on call or something. If you're a heart surgeon on call, then please answer the phone if it rings, because that's kind of important. But for the rest of us, probably most of us don't have something that can't wait till the end of a 5 minute practice session. Okay, so I think that's a really big deal. Again, there's a bit more information on that on the Effective Practice series. I think that's a big one. If you're the kind of person that likes things that are structured, definitely get into using a practice routine. I'm that dude. I love having a list of the things that I'm working on, hitting start, practicing it, ticking it off, monitoring how much practice I'm doing. I write down the speeds. I do get different scales and exercises too, that kind of stuff. For some people, it just doesn't work. I think it's a good idea to have a routine written down, but for me, I like having check boxes and marking stuff off it. I find it really helpful for the motivation. Again, over on the website, there's a blank template that you can download in a Word document thing that you can type in the things that you want to practice. It's got little squares for you to tick off or whatever. It's such a valuable tool for most people, but not everyone. Okay, so if it's not for you, don't worry. Just have a written down list of the things that you want to practice and try and work on practicing those every day. If you are a routine-y kind of a guy, then do give it a look. There's plenty more information again over on the website on how to set that up. It is something that you want to think about, and it should always be fluid. It should be able to change and fit in with how you're feeling about a routine, because it should stay fun. If you're doing a routine, you're like, oh man, I've got this thing to do, I really hate doing this, then it's time to move on and change it for something else. Okay, unless you're super serious wanting to be a professional musician, it should be fluid. If you're super like, I'm going to be the best guitar player ever in the world, then maybe you just have to knuckle down and do some stuff that's not that much fun. But most of the time, it just wants to be a fun experience. Okay, and the last one, this is maybe slightly contentious, but I would strongly recommend doing your practice away from YouTube. Now, clickbait is something that has been growing over the last 4 or 5 years. I see it all the time, especially because I'm kind of in the game. I find it a little bit scary how addictive and how people who are good at writing titles are able to kind of draw us in with these, 5 things you didn't know about X, or what are the best things about this, those kind of titles of videos are very, very clever, and they're really, really effective. There's a lot of psychological research gone into the principles that are being used, and they've got it down now. Advertisers know how to manipulate us in ways that we probably wouldn't really think is that cool. There's plenty of information around if you want to read up a little bit about how that sort of stuff works. I have to do it a little bit on my videos, and I feel like, oh man, I shouldn't be doing this, but it is just so effective that when I don't do it on my videos, they don't get the same view count. So over on YouTube, it's going to be full of that. And if you're watching a video and you're trying to practice along, you've got this big string of tempting clickbaity titles and thumbnails and stuff just waiting for you. So I really recommend that when you're sitting down to do your practice routine, that you don't do that. That you practice with the computer off or the screen down. So use YouTube to learn a lesson or find a thing that you want to check out, a song or whatever. Learn it, write it down, tab it out yourself, whatever. But when it comes time to practice, try not to have that screen on, because some of those titles are going to be so tempting that you really, really want to know about this effects pedal or that amp that you were thinking about buying, or comparing that amp that you've got with that other amp, or, it's just... I find it really frustrating now when I see on any one of my own videos and I look in the side, it's like way more than half of them are titles that are kind of playing on ideas that are they're kind of clickbaity, right? And I'm not saying clickbait as in like a super negative thing, because a lot of guys whose work I really respect use those kind of tools as well because they're really effective. But because they're so effective, I think that it's a really bad idea to practice with the YouTube screen on. So I would do your best to try and learn it from the screen, or go to a full screen is the other option if you want to stay on YouTube. Of course, you don't have that problem if you're ever on my website, because you don't have all of that distracting stuff there. So that's another option. But if you're going to stay on YouTube, flick it onto full screen so you can't see all of that other stuff there to distract you. When it comes time to finish as well, beware of all of those thumbnails that'll pop up on the screen, because again, they're presented right in front of you. You might find it difficult to avoid them. So big hint number 4 for you is accountability. Now, I'd strongly recommend that you write down your goals. So think about your short-term, mid-term, long-term goals, write them down. Tell someone about it. Tell your girlfriend or your mum and dad or your friends, or post on social media, or make a video on YouTube with it saying what it is that you hope to achieve. The last one's particularly good if you want to do some playing as well. Really nice way to monitor how you're progressing through the years is to be able to make a little video at the start of the year going, hey, this is what I can do now. This is what I'd like to achieve by the end of the year. Then you can look back at that video and go, oh man, I'm so much better at this and that, and I managed to do this, but I didn't manage to do that. Why didn't I manage to do this goal? And then have a think about why you didn't achieve the goals that you thought, and see if there's things that you can do to try and fix that problem for the following year. You know, that's a really, really good idea. So accountability, telling people your goals, trying to hold fast. You know, a private teacher is a good idea for that as well. So if you really struggle to hold down a practice routine and keep your motivation, having a teacher that you have to go and see every week or every couple of weeks or every month is a really good way of holding yourself in check. But it depends on your character type and how good you are at self-motivation. And the last hint, and you're really going to like this one, is to treat yourself to some new gear. Now, the start of the year, we're all feeling all inspired. So the first maybe week or 2 weeks, you can probably hold it together just with the practice routine. If you start to feel yourself dipping a little bit, grab yourself a bit of new gear. Now, I know this is kind of might fly against some of the other advice I've given before, but it really can be a nice, inspiring boost to grab yourself a new guitar or a new pedal, reignite the fire and interest in the music. So I don't think it's necessarily a bad idea to be feeding your gear addiction, but just don't spend hours and hours of time researching reviews and looking at demos and stuff when you could be practicing. Okay, that's, you know, again, I've met a lot of students that know loads of stuff about pedals and gear, and they know that really the minutiae between different models of stuff, but they can't really play very well, because they've spent much more of their time looking at gear reviews than they did actually playing. So gear is great fun. It can be really inspiring. I love it too. I'm not immune. We all are. I think it's part of the deal, and it's really good fun. But don't let the reviewsy part and the research part take over from time that you could practice. If you know, we talked earlier about making use of your time and then not, you know, flicking through social media. Maybe that time, maybe the boring meeting at work, or the stuck at the bus stop or the airport lounge or whatever, those kind of times are when you might want to be doing your gear research, not when you've got the opportunity of actually putting your fingers on the metal and doing some practice, because there isn't really a secret. Everyone who says that there's a trick to it, they're lying. You gotta put your fingers on the strings. Little saying that I used to like is that the hardest part of practice is getting your bum on the seat. For many of us, that is very true. So I really hope these hints will help you make this year your best guitar year ever. Let me know in the comments what your goals are, and I'll see if I can't hold you accountable in a year's time. So really wishing you a fantastic year. You take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.